Hello, I hope you can see me. I sincerely apologize as it seems we had a technical difficulty. We tested the live stream earlier on. It sounded great on the page that we've got on the site to test these things. And I was getting calls and texts saying that the audio was just distorting like crazy. So I've just gone ahead and tested it. It sounded just fine. So I'm just going to have your comments on the side here just so I can see if you told me that it didn't sound too good. And I'll go through the lesson once more. So here's the audio. Hopefully that sounds good. And if you got any problems, just let me know. So I don't know how much of that you saw, how much you understood because of the distortion that was going on. So I'll start from the beginning when it comes to using the hot cue loops. So I was explaining how over here on the track I've set up a couple of hot cues. Now if you don't know what hot cues do, as soon as you push a hot cue, it will take your track to the position of the cue point, the hot cue, and start playing it back. So even from a completely stopped position, as soon as I press hot cue A, it starts playing back the track from wherever I set the hot cue A marker. Now, this is also a looped hot cue because when I set this hot cue, I had an active loop around this vocal. So, what I was explaining is that you can have something else playing, and as long as they're mixed in key, you can loop a vocal snippet like this and have a lot of fun with it. Introduce it, take it out, add effects, and kind of bring it in as a vocal effect on the side. And this is what I was demonstrating before. So I'm going to go through that once more, just so you can hear it in high quality. So here I have a track playing. I will skip forward a bit. I'm going to start this one with the hot cue. Now that I've beat matched it, I'm going to start turning it up and down. And have fun. And then I can start fading it up gradually, all the way. Fade this track out. And use hot cue B to get to the next part of my mix. And then let the track play on. And what I was explaining is that this works really well if the tracks are related in key. Because when you've got your music related in key, it means that this vocal will be in tune with whatever melodies and chords and bass lines the other track will be producing. Think about it like this. If you've ever seen X Factor or The Voice or something like that, and you've heard a singer who just sounds really bad, you may not know technically why, you just know they sound bad. It's because the notes that they're generating with their voice are out of tune with the music playing in the background. When a singer can sing in tune, then it sounds much more harmonious. So it's quite easy to tell which tracks are in key and which aren't, especially if you've got two decks linked with a LAN cable, the way that I have over here. See, if you're on a playlist and you tap menu and you sort by either BPM or key, I know you may not be able to see that super well, but I'm tapping the menu button, I'm pressing sort by BPM or key, then all the tracks which are related in key are going to have a green highlight on the little key symbol. This is right beside the BPM symbol. If you've sorted by key, then the whole key section is going to have a green highlight over it. And you can do this on really large playlists as well. So if I go into one of my other playlists, I've already sorted by key, and you can see that the little key symbol next to where it says CM has a little green highlight. I said you may not be able to see it too well, but one more time, tab menu, sort by key or BPM, and on the tracks related in key to the master track, there will be a little green highlight. Okay. Now, the next thing I was going to go over is how do we mix tracks which have full vocal verses. So let me just load the correct tracks. So, one thing you want to avoid doing is playing a full vocal over another piece of music if they don't work really well together. And it can be quite rare when you do find a full vocal works well over another track. This is purely because of what I mentioned before. If they're not singing in tune with the chords and melodies the other track has got, it's going to sound pretty bad, just like the bad X Factor or The Voice singers. So for this reason, as a general rule of thumb, try to fade out your previous track as soon as the vocal on your new one begins. So this track that I've loaded here has a full vocal verse that begins straight after the intro. So if I was mixing out of this track into this one, this track would be faded down the moment the vocal on this one begins. And this goes back to phrasing. If I'm counting my phrases, it's very easy to keep track of this. So if I cue this track exactly 2 phrases before the vocal begins, then I know that from the moment I press play, I have 2 phrases of time to turn it up, do whatever I want to do with EQs, and then at the end of the second phrase, turn the other track down. I'm going to go through this mix right away so you can hear what it would sound like. Hopefully with high fidelity audio. Let me just double check the comments. Cool. Okay. We'll start this here. I'm going to count the phrase. 6, 7, 8, 2, 3, 4, 1. Seven, that's the end of my first phrase. 2, 3, 4, 1. So I'm turning up the track. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and as soon as the vocal comes in, 2, 3, 4, 1. My previous track is cut off. Now to make the mix smooth, just on the very last bar of that second phrase, I'm adding a bit of echo and I'm turning up the filter. And I'm doing this because if you were to abruptly turn down the volume like this, it just cuts off immediately, and it can make the mix sound a little bit harsh, a little bit too abrupt. But if you add a little bit of an echo, then it can make the mix sound a lot smoother. It kind of creates a bridge between your 2 tracks. Have a listen. Then you fade down the track and you see how those delays continue on for a while. That can make the fade out sound significantly less abrupt. Now, depending on the music that you're mixing, your transitions can be significantly different. So if you've got a vocal that's coming up on the next phrase, you may want to turn down your other track straight away when that vocal kicks in. However, if you don't have a vocal, if you've only got prominently drum rhythms and perhaps a little bit of a bass line or something like that, you can keep them playing together for longer and just use your EQs to gradually blend from one to the other. So if we were going to look at something that's a little bit more minimal melodic, you'll find that the mixes with that kind of music tend to be a lot longer because we don't need to mix super quickly. So I'll play this track. And then I'll pick another one here. Two, three, four, 1. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 2, 3, 4, 1. I can start turning up the track gradually. I don't need to go abrupt because it doesn't need to have such a sudden change in volume. It will sound smoother if you're smooth with the volume fader. If I hear them drift out a little bit, I'll correct it. And I can gradually use the EQs. No sudden movements. In the same way that these tracks build gradually, your mixing is gradual. As I'm turning one of the low EQs down, I'm turning the other one up. At all times, I know where I am in my phrase. 6, 7, 8, 2, 3, 4, 1. And I can keep them playing together because I've cut off all the bass of my previous track. Therefore, we're not hearing any proper melodic elements, we're just hearing the percussion. See? And I can gradually fade this out whenever I like. I could use some echo, but I don't have to because I'm being gradual with the fader anyway. I want to emphasize the fact that depending on the style of music that you're mixing, the type of transitions that you'll be using are significantly different. With some styles of music, like ones which contain a long vocal verse, a very prominent one, you might want to fade the previous track out immediately, unless you've tested out that that vocal works very well over your other track. If it doesn't, play it safe, fade out the other track. With tracks that don't contain vocals and are more percussive based, take longer to mix. You don't need to make any sudden, abrupt changes in volume because it's not going to add anything to your mix. It's not going to make it better. In fact, it might make it worse because the style of these tracks is quite minimal and gradual. So if you start trying to, bring up the volume quickly and do things like that, it might change the feel and kind of make people feel a little bit uneasy. So stick to smoother, longer transitions. Always know where you are in the phrase, because on almost all genres of music, every time a new phrase begins, something will change in your track. So if your big changes occur during those moments, then your mixing is going to sound much better because people are going to expect a change to occur during that time. Okay, I'm going to go back to the vocal tracks because I want to emphasize a couple of points for today. Back to the hot cues. One thing I want to emphasize is the fact that if the hot cue loop that you've created is a small vocal snippet that perhaps sounds more like a sound effect than a full vocal verse, tracks don't necessarily need to be mixed in key. So you could just pick 2 tracks at any random key, but they have to work musically. So if you're going to go from a track with a certain style and a certain type of energy to a different one with a totally different type of energy, it's not necessarily going to sound very good. So if you're using tracks like this, where there's a little vocal loop, and it's more of an effect, don't worry so much if you can't find another track which is related in key. Focus more on finding another track that has a similar feel to the music. So when you layer that vocal over the other track, it sounds like it's part of the other track. Now, what I want you to go out and do is create a playlist of tracks with vocals that you really like. Some of the tracks may have full vocal verses, like this one. Some of them might only have a little vocal snippet, like this one. I want you to find the tracks with the vocal snippets, set a 1-bar loop around them, and save that loop as a hot cue. Now that's going to be hot cue A. Then you're going to find another part of the track with a proper beat, not necessarily the drop because that's the heaviest part of the track, but just another part of the track where the beat comes in, and save the beginning of that phrase as hot cue B. So hot cue A is here, hot cue B is there. One phrase before hot cue A. This allows you to go from hot cue A, jump to hot cue B's position, and let your track play on properly. Now, on the tracks with the full vocal verses, what I want you to do is set a memory cue where the beginning of that vocal verse is. So over here on CDJ, what you would do is cue the track first. So you'd find the position of the track, and then you'd push the cue button to set the cue point, and then you would push the memory button. Same thing on the CDJ 2000 Nexus 2, you would cue the track, then you would push the memory button, which is right here. That would save that cue point as a memory cue. Now when you save a memory cue, your memory cues will show up on your waveform as red triangle markers above the waveform. That can let you know when the main vocal verse is coming in, so that when you're mixing the track, as soon as you reach that point, the other track is faded down straight away. Again, if you want to play that vocal over another track, test them out first. Make sure they sound good. And another tip I could give you is make sure that other track doesn't have too much going on, and especially doesn't have a vocal going on. The absolute worst thing you can do is mix two vocals over each other. Even if they're related in key, it's just going to sound like too many people speaking, and there's no intelligibility to the vocals. Okay? Now, because the previous stream got cut short, rather not got cut short, but it was very distorted, what I'm going to do before I finish this stream is mix through this playlist once more with all the techniques that I've just talked about, just so you can see how I use them in action. If you've got any questions, leave them in the comments below, and I'll try and answer them after the stream. And also, any other topics you want me to cover throughout these live streams that we'll be doing, again, either send us a private message, leave them in the comments. Over the next few weeks, we'll be going through all of them. So we'll begin with track 1. I also want to give a big shout out to Captain Records for providing me with these tracks to use for the tutorials. Now, this track's playing, it's got a bit of a vocal, but not a proper vocal verse, it's more of an effect. So that's alright. I've got my hot cues set up on my second track. My first hot cue is the 1-bar vocal loop. I'm going to press play, match the tempo, and get it in sync by nudging the jog wheel. And now I'm going to start playing around with it. Add some effect. And I'll start my mix now by turning it up gradually. Now, whenever I want, I can go into Hot QB. I could add some effects first. 8, 2, 3, 4. And we're fully into our second track. And this wasn't a conventional mix at all. I used 2 hot cues, one looped hot cue over a vocal, and then a second hot cue to take me to the beginning of my drum beat. Now for the next track, it has a full vocal verse. So I have to make sure that I don't play that vocal verse over this track. So this track needs to be faded out as soon as the vocal verse comes in. Thankfully, I've set a memory marker so I can see the moment that it's about to come in. So if I was to start the mix now, I have 2 phrases. Start turning up this track. One phrase left. 5, 6, 7. Add a bit of echo. 8, 2, 3, 4, 1. And we're fully into our new track with the vocal playing by itself. Awesome. I hope that's given you some ideas, and I hope you've learned something from today. If you were watching the live stream from before, I apologize about the technical difficulties with the noise. Hopefully we've got it sorted permanently now. We'll be doing these every single week for as long as the quarantine lasts, and hopefully even after as well. We're also offering one-to-one lessons, which of course you can book, and it will be myself teaching you at the moment. All of our other amazing teachers are self-isolating. I hope you are too, and you're staying safe. I will see you in the next stream. Take care.